The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess has been my favourite Zelda game since I started playing Zelda. I, being born in 1996, never really got into the hype of Ocarina of Time or Majora's Mask because I was literally 0 or 1 years old at the time that it became a thing around here. So when I actually did eventually get into Legend of Zelda at the age of 11, Twilight Princess was the Zelda game that was coming out, and when I played it, it instantly became an immediate fan favourite for me. And I don't really know why. It could have been a nostalgia thing, but it was just the whole explorative, realistic, fun, adventure-y feel that the game had was something that I didn't think I was ever going to lose magically in my life for the longest time. Yet The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild has completely blown it out of the water. And in my mind, it has now become my new favourite Legend of Zelda game. And I don't really know how I can explain it too well because it's just a thing that I feel rather than a thing I could say. For the longest time, I was thinking of doing a Twilight Princess review in the upcoming weeks for Breath of the Wild, and because of busyness and slow productions on Daz Reviews anyway, wasn't able to get it out on time, and nowadays I don't feel like it's going to be very powerful to go with. And in regards to making a Breath of the Wild review, everyone's already done it, and I decided I wanted to play a few more hours into it before I could really give a good judgment. At this point, I've been playing the game for probably like 15 to 20 hours, I'm not really too sure, I haven't found the playtime menu yet. And in general, it's just something about the game brings back a magic that I didn't think I would have felt unless I was still living in my childhood. But it just seems to me that Twilight Princess, although it has its flaws and everyone usually doesn't have it as their fan favourite, it was my personal favourite, and yet every aspect about it seems to have been improved upon. The biggest thing I really liked about Twilight Princess was mostly this realistic vision, because at the time of my age of 11, I hadn't really played a realistic game before. I was very much deep into the whole of Nintendo and a little bit of Sega. Everything was cartoony and fun. So to be able to play a Zelda game that was still kind of cartoony and kind of fun, but with this realistic aesthetic of real-looking rocks and towns and darkness was really quite gripping for me. And Breath of the Wild is not the most realistic-looking game. It is admittedly quite stylized, Link himself looking the most cartoony in anything in the game. But even still, it's real enough that it's something that makes me feel like I could properly be immersed in the game. And not that a cartoony game doesn't immerse me as well, but this one gives me an extra sense of, wow, I am in this game, I can totally immerse myself in all of this. And on top of that though, in comparing the two together, I don't even know. It's, again, something I can't really say in words, but it's just a thing that I feel. I've got a whole practical review of Twilight Princess set up, listing the numbers for each category I would have judged the game, but when I can try and compare it to Breath of the Wild, I can pretty much see every combination of categories being improved upon in the new game. I mean, polish for the last thing, I put for Twilight Princess as number 10 out of 10 for the HD version because of everything it fixed, but Breath of the Wild takes it to a new level. The amount of fun sandbox things you can do is immense to get your head around, to the point that many gamers don't even know half of them exist. Like putting an octo balloon on an enemy's weapon makes it unable to grab it for a little bit, or literally flying away with the octo balloons and having enemies throw pebbles because they don't have a weapon to try and pop the balloons, or just using a Kuko against an enemy. If it gets hit enough, it will actually be attacked by the Kukos instead of Link this time. There is so much extra polish that was put into this game that it's something that I can't overlook and think, oh, it's just another Zelda game, because so much heart and soul went into this game, despite it being so massive and potential for just being empty. And Twilight Princess itself is one of the biggest games before Breath of the Wild that the Zelda franchise had, and while it's not it's not exactly empty, there is still quite a chunk of empty space, and most of the puzzles you come to are only really accessible later in the game. So for the most part, you'd be just horse riding across Hyrule Fields just to get to the end, because there's nothing really else to see. There may be bugs to collect, but there'll be 2 in each area, and that's it. Breath of the Wild, while it does have its empty space, contextually, it makes sense. There's such a large world that there is more opportunity for these vast open lands of practically nothing that then also encourage you to explore and find the things that are nearby. And with like the whole mechanic of Korok seeds to find and memories to explore and shrines everywhere, the emptiness is non-existent. There is empty space in places, but it's paced perfectly right that you can go in any direction and it won't take you very long at all before you find something. And that's something that like Twilight Princess started doing well with, but in hindsight didn't perfect, especially because, as I said earlier, many of the puzzles weren't really accessible until later in the game when you had a magical rod that made statues move. In this game, the pacing I thought was a bit odd when I was first introduced to it, because in the first area you're given practically every rune, every basic mechanic. Bombs and fire arrows are just a thing you start with, and yet it makes the world a lot more accessible and open for exploration. And while, like, narratively, if they were part of the story, it would be very rushed. The beginning would be very rushed and crushed and not very good. But after that, because that's not the case and it's not a narrative-driven item, it's just there because it's part of your Sheikah slate. So narratively, I guess it makes sense as well. It just means you could just go in a direction and you might find something and you can most likely fix it, and it will change it and reveal whatever is there, whether it's a treasure chest hidden behind a breakable boulder. There's just so much opportunity for exploration, and I think that's what I liked the most about Twilight Princess. It was great that there was this realistic aesthetic that got me immersed in the game, but the game felt big back then. The fact that you could get on Epona and just you could be riding from like the other side of Hyrule. It would take you a good long time. Then you come to Breath of the Wild, and the game is 12 times larger in size. And on top of that, there's more opportunities for movement. You can walk or run across the fields, and that's fine. But there are horses everywhere, or in most places, that you can ride on and ride in whatever direction, and that's all great. But then you've also got this paraglider, which has this element of actually flying and getting there quite fast, and you got time travel. You got travel gates that teleport you around, and to be fair, Twilight Princess did have that, but everything seems a lot more fun to explore, because also Twilight Princess was a series of flat areas that you could disperse in between. The biggest latitudinal difference would have been between Hylia Lake and the Gerudo Desert, simply because the desert is higher up and you need a cannon to actually reach the desert. But other than that, there isn't a lot of latitudinal angles in everything. Breath of the Wild has this massive mountain everywhere. Not the same mountain, but you know what I mean. There's so much opportunity to get up high, look around, see what there is to explore, and just glide down to it. And the fact that there's so little loading screens when you're just traversing across the lands, unless you're using a travel gate, is something that's so cool and amazing. And it's just, I don't know. It's something that I haven't felt for a video game in a really long time. This is the game I was imagining Pikmin 3 or 4 could potentially be. Like, again, of course I'm going back to Pikmin, but imagine an open-air Pikmin game like this where you could set a point in the land to go to and just explore and harvest the area as you can, and whatever dangers are in whatever direction. That would be such an amazing game, especially considering how small Onomer and Pikmin are. You wouldn't even need to do a massive expansive land, just a small land that's gigantified because of the size of the characters. But going back to the Breath of the Wild, everything that I liked about Twilight Princess, Breath of the Wild has done amazingly better. And even the things that are completely different, I guess, is less likely to compare, like the music. Obviously, Twilight Princess has more of the classical motif soundtrack of Zelda, though I do still really like the Twilight Princess soundtrack because of, like, not just the style of it, but also just it's just higher quality than the N64 games, like the actual quality of the instruments and all that. And yet Breath of the Wild goes for this much more ambient soundtrack of silence, apart from the times when you find a guardian and the pianist decides to have a stroke on the bloody keyboard. But I don't know. This is a game that, even though it's only March of 2017, at this point it is by far my game of the year. I cannot put it down. And sure, I might have only been playing for 20 hours, and that's probably not a lot to a lot of people. But the other day, I filmed, or recorded, and played Zelda for about 4 hours, trying to complete the entire West Necluda region of the map. Getting every Korok, every shrine, every treasure, every memory, and all that fun stuff. And then had a break, started editing down all the footage. An hour later, I was like, I need to play Zelda. I played it for 4 hours, and I'm not sick of the game. And honestly, when I've played these large open-world games like Skyrim or Fallout, there's so much stuff to do that I don't do any of it, and I quit after a while. And Breath of the Wild, while doesn't seem to be that chocked full of content to the point where there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of side quests, there's only 70-odd, it's just enough, and the pacing is just good enough somehow for me that I can't put it down. And maybe in another 20 or 30 hours I'll be like, I've had enough of this game, I'm very sick of it. But that time doesn't seem like it's coming anytime soon. So yeah, much like Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild has gone back to its Zelda roots in giving you this open, explorative world. I've gone back to my roots in making videos less scripted, at least for this video. It was just a random rant. I was thinking of doing a Twilight Princess review and thought, nah, it's too late for that. Thought of doing a Breath of the Wild review, thought, nah, I'm not good for that either. So instead, you get this. This is why, for me personally, and probably most people would agree anyway, because no one seems to like Twilight Princess, Breath of the Wild is better than Twilight Princess, and it is my new favourite Zelda game. Right, I'm going to go back to playing that game now. What's up, guys? It's Daz here, but you didn't really care, and I'll see you in a bit.